Chosen ones, awaken your soul. The fire meant to destroy you only refined you. They counted you out, whispered behind closed doors, and labeled you as finished. But they were wrong, so very wrong. The ones who face the most resistance are often the ones destined to bring the greatest change. History repeats itself. Visionaries, revolutionaries, and those ahead of their time were doubted before they were revered. And you too will rise beyond the words and doubts of others. The very people who threw dirt on your name will soon watch as you thrive beyond their comprehension. Now, the tables turn. Opportunity is knocking. You can now earn without working. The world doubted you, but now it will have no choice but to witness your rise. Stay ready. The path is unfolding before you. You were never meant to fit in. They fought you so fiercely for that reason. They attempted to shut you down from the start because they knew you weren't intended to fit in. The existing quo was upset by something about you. Perhaps it was the way you refused to accept things as they were, or the way you moved or thought differently. Whatever it was, it caused unease, not because you were incorrect, but rather because you were unassailable. People don't spend time on things that aren't dangerous or fight things that don't important. Resistance wasn't an indication that you were headed in the wrong direction. Rather, it was proof that you were onto something significant. The people around you, the surroundings, and the system all saw it before you did. They understood that you had the power to alter the course of the game and weren't simply another piece of the jigsaw. They were frightened by it. They thus made every effort to get you to doubt yourself. They attempted to confine you, minimized your thoughts, and disregarded your potential. They told themselves that you would remain silent if they made enough noise, that you would back down if they pushed too hard, and that you would disappear if they isolated you. The fact that you weren't built like the others was something they failed to take into consideration. You didn't need permission, and you weren't seeking approval. You became stronger the harder they pressed. Resistance just made you sharper, contrary to their belief that it would break you. They didn't understand that every loss was really a prelude to a greater comeback. So they saw your defeats as defeat. They are now watching in shock as they are unable to ignore the same thing they attempted to repress. They battled you because they were aware of it before you were, and now they must confront what they have worked so hard to conceal. Their assaults were not a reflection of your limits, but rather of their own. People's treatment of you was entirely their fault and had nothing to do with you. It was never about your talent or value, not even their skepticism, criticism, or hostility. It was an expression of their own shortcomings, anxieties, and insecurities. They felt intimidated rather than inspired because they saw something in you that they didn't see in themselves. Big energy is too much for those with little brains to manage. They are unsure of how to handle someone who doesn't follow the same unwritten standards they have lived by their whole lives. Therefore, they project, criticize, and denigrate, not because you lack the ability, but rather because they secretly lack it. They see you grabbing for something they were too scared to pursue. They see you shattering walls they were afraid to approach. Additionally, it's simpler for them to attempt to persuade you to settle as well, rather than acknowledge that they did. The people who made fun of you weren't always strangers because of this. Sometimes the individuals who should have been your strongest supporters, friends, family, and mentors were the ones closest to you. However, the fact is that they were rejecting the version of themselves that lacked the bravery to achieve what you are doing, not you. To keep themselves comfortable, they needed you to fail. Because what justification would they have if you created it? When you stood in front of them and demonstrated that what they had persuaded themselves was impossible, how could they defend it? Not understanding that every word they spoke was a confession rather than a forecast, they attempted to persuade you that you weren't enough, that your dreams were too lofty, and that you should quit before you humiliate yourself. The reality, however, is now indisputable. They were the issue, not you. And those who attempted to stop you will eventually have to acknowledge that they were the ones who were missing all along, not you. A script that they believed would never alter gets disrupted by you. Everything around you, including how people think, behave, and anticipate life to unfold, was designed to fit a predetermined script. It's all a pattern that keeps happening. The majority of individuals accept the script that is given to them and follow it without question. However, you were the disruption they never saw coming. You came here to completely rewrite their tale, not to contribute to their already written one. They opposed you so strongly because of this. Not only were you unique, but you were also erratic. You posed a threat to the system they relied on, since you wouldn't proceed in the manner they anticipated. Simply by being yourself, you made a difference in your family, neighborhood, workplace, and even society at large. And they attempted to eradicate the danger rather than adjust. People despise what they cannot control and fear what they do not comprehend. They wanted you to be obedient, controllable, and to choose the same path they did. You weren't made for it, however. You weren't placed here to repeat history. You weren't wired to be normal. You were destined to succeed. They thus made every effort to stop you. They questioned your choices, criticized your vision, and made you feel like you were the problem, not because you truly were, but because they weren't ready for the change you represented. They attempted to narrow their ideas, rather than broaden yours, since you didn't fit into theirs. What they failed to see, however, was that the narrative they were fighting so hard to preserve was already out of date. They clung to a system that was never intended to endure. Additionally, they failed to see that the world was moving in your favor, while they were preoccupied with attempting to quiet you. They must now face the reality, whether they like it or not. They were afraid of your success, not your failure, because they can't go back to acting like it doesn't need to be changed after you alter the script. They are now bankrupt after investing in your demise. Some individuals work harder to bring you down than they ever did to succeed themselves. They observed you, researched you, and plotted against you, not to elevate themselves, but to ensure that you failed to climb. Envy, insecurity, and the fervent wish that you would fail drove every action they took. They are now bankrupt because they staked everything on your failure. They didn't realize their energy wasn't limitless, so they threw themselves into trying to block you. They were withdrawing from their own lives each time they undermined you, talked about you, or attempted to incite others against you. They didn't realize how much they were losing because they were so intent on preventing you from winning. You continued to move while others squandered their time planning. You were constructing while they were overwhelmed by hatred. And now, they have nothing left to show for their efforts. No advancement, no growth, no success. Just empty palms and a lengthy list of missed possibilities. The irony? To win, you never needed them to fail. It was just a natural result of their concern with stopping you. It wasn't your intention to bring them down. They risked everything on the assumption that you wouldn't make it, rather than utilizing their time to better themselves. And now they have to watch while you disprove their claims. Not only did you succeed, but they exerted every ounce of effort to stop it. While you're going ahead with greater power than ever before, they're worn out, resentful, and trapped where they began. They made an investment in your demise. But what was the yield? Only regret. Alignment, not strength, was the key to your resilience. Resilience is often thought of as strength, the capacity to withstand hardship, battle hard, and be strong. But that's not the true reason you made it through. It wasn't about willpower alone, or about exerting more effort than anybody else. It has to do with alignment. You weren't only getting by, you were making progress that rendered their assaults pointless. They could never really beat you since you weren't playing their game. You were soaring above them as they attempted to draw you into fights. You were connecting with something more profound, while others were depleting themselves with negativity. Being so in sync with your goal that nothing can pull you away from it is what resilience is all about, not outliving others. Some individuals squander their energy, fighting conflicts that were never intended for them. They burn themselves up attempting to make a point. However, you had a different understanding. You didn't spend time making every little argument. Distractions did not cause you to go off track. You continued to move in unison with something bigger. They were unable to break you because of this. They weren't using the same frequency as you were. They threw all they had at you. But because you were traveling in a whole opposite lane, none of it stayed. They wanted you to fight back, to participate in their drama, to respond. You didn't have to, however. You went above. They now don't comprehend how you're still alive. They believed it to be a matter of strength, of who could bear the greatest suffering. In actuality, though, you did more than simply persevere. You changed. What was supposed to stop you was gone. You rose above what was designed to hold you down. And now, when you've reached a level they can't even understand, they're still caught in the same loop. They just saw the top, not the roots. They believed they grasped your boundaries after observing you. They evaluated you based on your outward manifestations, such as your hardships, failures, and silent growth moments. If they cut you down, they thought that was the end of it. They were unaware that what they observed was merely a small portion of who you really are. Your roots, the invisible base that made you unbreakable, were what they overlooked. The strength that didn't need promotion, the resilience developed in the shadows, the lessons you learnt in secret. Since they could only see what was above ground, they assumed you were delicate. They thought you were a transient object that could be taken away with a little effort. However, you were something far more profound than a plant. Thus, they administered their injections. They believed you would wither away, so they attempted to cut you down. They attempted to reject you, expecting you'd fade into irrelevance. However, each time they believed you were done, you returned stronger. Each failure simply strengthened your base. Every attempt to shatter you only made you develop in different ways. They were unaware that their resistance was really helping you, rather than hindering you. And now, they're perplexed. They don't comprehend how you're still here, still climbing, still living. They believe they buried you, but all they did was plant you. Because unlike them, you weren't constructed on shallow ground. Your strength wasn't determined by outward looks, popularity, or fleeting achievement. It had a foundation in reality, something they were unable to touch. They are now forced to see you as you develop beyond their wildest expectations. They attempted to manipulate the outside, but they were never able to match the depth of who you really are. Isolation strengthened you, contrary to their belief that it would break you. They believed that cutting you off would make you weaker. They believed that you would become more and more isolated if they ignored you, excluded you, or incited others against you. They felt that without their validation, their approval, or their presence, you'd disintegrate. They were unaware, however, that seclusion was a kind of preparation rather than a punishment. Isolation offered you insight, something most people never have, rather than shattering you. You were able to see yourself for who you really were, without the cacophony of their views. You were able to concentrate on what really important, without being distracted by their games. And you stopped asking for permission to be who you were always supposed to be when they ceased influencing you. They felt you needed them, but the reality is, they needed you. They need your presence, your thoughts, and your enthusiasm. They sensed your strength deep down, which is why they made such a concerted effort to dominate you, and they attempted to destroy you after they were unable to control you. However, all they did was allow you to change into something they were unable to influence. Being alone didn't weaken you. Rather, it made you more independent. You learned how to stand on your own, whereas others depended on groups, approbation, and continual affirmation. They are now unsure on how to handle you. You've come to the realization that being different wasn't a loss, but rather a gift. Therefore, you're no longer trying to fit in. They anticipated finding you shattered and pleading for admission when they returned. Rather, they're recognizing that you completely outgrown them. Isolation is something you mastered, not simply endured. The same individuals who excluded you are now seeing you from a distance, understanding too late that they never had the ability to shatter you. Your quiet was the prelude to the most powerful effect, not a sign of weakness. They thought you were giving up when you didn't speak. They thought you were weak because you didn't protest, defend yourself, or make an effort to prove yourself. Because you didn't respond as they had anticipated. They believed they had won. However, they overlooked the fact that silence is the ultimate control of power, not its absence. Not because you had nothing to say, but rather because you didn't have to defend yourself to those who were determined to misunderstand you. You didn't spend time attempting to win over those who were already skeptical of you. You were running your race while they were busy running their tongues. You were creating something tangible while others were making noise. Words may be disputed, misrepresented, and disregarded, but the outcomes speak for themselves. You were aware of it. You didn't go to your defense when they questioned you because of this. You didn't strive to show your value to others who didn't perceive it because of this. Rather, you let time speak for itself. You allow your reaction to be action. The same individuals who formerly disregarded you are now forced to watch you succeed. Your tolerance, not weakness, was shown by your quiet. It was a plan. It was your decision to put more money into your development than into meaningless conflicts. Your achievement now overrides all they have ever said about you. They anticipated a response, but instead received a revelation. You never required their approval in the first place. All they have left to consume now are their own words. They mistaken the hush for defeat, but it was really the quiet before the storm. Unstoppable, indisputable, and shouting louder than any argument could ever hope to. That storm has now come. You were playing a game of destiny, while they were playing a game of power. They believed they were outwitting you. Every action, deception, obstruction, and effort to discredit you was premeditated. They thought they were in charge, that they were setting the rules. However, they were unaware that you were heading toward destiny, while they were vying for power. They were fixated with fleeting triumphs, and little bursts of dominance that gave them a sense of superiority. They were quick, impetuous, and reactive while playing checkers. However, you weren't even on the same board. You weren't simply playing chess, however. This was a divine plan. Tricks and manipulation were not the foundation of your journey. Long before they knew you existed, it was written. Their assaults never really succeeded because of this. They could put you off, but they couldn't stop you. They couldn't change the result, but they could put up barriers. Because you were working on something far larger, alignment, while they were occupied with tactical maneuvers. While you were already set up for the full trip, they were considering the next move. They didn't realize that although power is fleeting, meaning endures forever. While you were moving towards something they couldn't touch, they were fighting for control of the present. Because of this, you always have another move, even when they think they have you trapped. Not because you were fortunate, but because you were destined. The fact that they were wearing themselves out in a game they were never supposed to win, rather than outplaying you, is now dawning on them. Because nothing can stop what was always meant to be when you're moving in harmony with something bigger. Not even a plan, a strategy, or manipulation. They required you to look for affirmation, but you never needed it. They never wanted to validate you. They wanted you to pursue validation. They wanted you to feel as if you required their approval to be valuable, to rely on their judgment, and to always seek their favor. Because they controlled you as long as you needed them to tell you that you were enough. But the whole dynamic changed the instant you stopped looking for it. Without attempting, you took away their authority. For it, they were unprepared. They were unsure of how to handle someone who didn't need approval to be exceptional, who didn't falter in the face of praise, and who didn't break down in the face of criticism. They never anticipated independence as a weapon. That kind of person thrives on control. They create whole settings, relationships, and institutions around the idea that people must earn approval. Whether they can make you feel inadequate is more important than whether you're good enough, because you're controllable as long as you're not confident of yourself. However, they get anxious the instant they understand that their approval is meaningless. They need your concern for their opinions. They required you to rely on what they thought, but their power vanished as soon as you took charge of your own destiny. They're the ones scurrying now. They can't harm you by being silent. They can't shake you with rejection. You've already given yourself something they could never offer you. So they can't dangle affirmation like a prize. They must now see you stand alone, unflinching, unstoppable. The one thing they never wanted to witness was that. Their skepticism gave you more energy than their assistance ever could. Had they helped you, you may have been more at ease. You may have chosen the easy route, slowed down, and doubted yourself less. However, they didn't think you were real. They treated you with scorn, disdain, and mistrust, and that had a significant impact. Their encouragement could never have ignited the fire inside you as it did. You had to work harder because of their incredulity. You kept digging deeper each time they counted you out. You improved your abilities each time they told you you wouldn't make it. Their skepticism turned out to be the same thing that made you successful, because it took away your justification for playing tiny, rather than shattering you. You may have gotten by with less if they had had faith in you. It's possible that you depended on their support rather than your own motivation. However, their denial, it forced you to have faith in yourself. The greatest thing that could have occurred was that they left you with nothing to rely on except your own skills. You rose because of their uncertainty, not in spite of it. It provided you with something to challenge and something to prove to yourself, not to them. It made you so unquestionable that their viewpoints were rendered moot. And now, they must only watch while you exceed all of their expectations of you. They believed that uncertainty would make you weaker. They believed that refusing assistance would deter you. However, they just served to strengthen an irrepressible will that was much more powerful than approbation. They couldn't imagine, so they laughed. They look on in shock now. They couldn't see it, so they laughed. Your idea was too audacious for their narrow imaginations and too grand for their little brains. They wrote you off, laughed at you, and disregarded you. Not because you were wrong, but because they couldn't see outside their own world. Their minds were too limited to understand your dreams, not that they were impractical. They believed their astonishment established your boundaries, that their laughing had significance, and that it held weight. However, it never did. Their belief was never necessary for you to proceed. To achieve, you never need their approval. You were busy constructing, and they were busy doubting. You were working hard, while others were amused by their own cynicism. The laughing has now ceased. They're watching, eyes wide, seeking to comprehend how you did it, how you transformed something they ridiculed into something that cannot be denied, how you disproved them without ever having to provide evidence. The irony? Those who were unable to envision it back then are now having difficulty accepting it. Some people will now act as if they always anticipated your success. Some will remain mute in the hopes that you won't recall what they said. To boost their own egos, some people will still attempt to downplay your accomplishments. However, the fact is that their belief was never necessary. Thus, none of it mattered. You saw what others couldn't, and that was always enough. You were intended to be remembered, not to be loved. Too many individuals spend their time and effort attempting to fit in by changing who they are to fit the crowd's preferences. However, you were never intended to fit in. Even if it meant standing by yourself, you were supposed to stand out. You were here to have an effect, not to win people over. And applause isn't necessarily a sign of effect. The fact is that true leaders, trailblazers, and innovators are seldom adored in their own time. They are misinterpreted, questioned, chastised, and sometimes even despised. People are afraid of what they don't comprehend. When anything confronts them, they reject it. How about you? You served as a reminder that more was possible, and a disturbance to their ease. You were dangerous just for that. They didn't stand by you because they weren't prepared, not because you weren't deserving, as you were never intended to blend in. You were supposed to be unique. You were always intended to be remembered, not loved. They will never forget the day they learned they could never completely delete you, regardless of how much they admire you. This is just the beginning. If this message resonated with you and you felt the fire in your soul. This area is reserved for those who don't want to be ignored, for those who use rejection as motivation and uncertainty as fuel. Be a part of this movement instead of simply watching. We are just beginning, so hit that subscribe button. If you understand what it's like to overcome adversity, you'll like this video. Tell them they should never have questioned you in a comment. And since genuine ones encourage one another, spread this message if you know someone who needs it. This is a wake-up call, not just content. And believe me, they're awake now.